Hello, hello guys, can you hear me?
Yes, doctor.
Yes, doctor.
Okay, thank you. So I guess you can see my slides.
Yeah, we
I'll
can see your slide.
change here. You can see I'm flipping the slides. Okay. Okay, guys. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Very good morning, very good afternoon, everyone joining here. This is Dr. Hussein. We'll continue our previous lecture. We already started with OOP, object-oriented programming. We already discussed the differences between the conventional or procedural language as compared with object-oriented. So today we have another topic which is quite short, so I hope that we can finish within 1 hour. But before that, I would like to highlight some issues about the mini project. So next week, hopefully, I will give you a brief about regarding the mini project, the theme, the domain area, the timeline, and the group. So hopefully from now until next week, next class, you have to form a group of 3. So the maximum is 3. So you have to find friend. I will make it open for you. It's up to you. You have to choose anyone you like to work with. So, but the maximum is 3 here. Okay. Next week, I will give brief about what you have to do, the timelines, and so on. If this is clear for you, I will try to give my lecture here. Is it okay? Next week, I will give you the idea, but I will waiting from you. I'll be waiting the list. So I need to see by next week, by the end of next week, each group. Okay, clear? So group of 3, you have to form a group of 3 from now. All right, so today we will be covering the concept of Unified Modeling Language, or UML in short. So basically, UML, it is graphical, if you can call it, it's graphical language, yeah. It's used for a representation of classes. So before you start your coding, it's better to start with UML. You have to drive the graphs, the classes, how these classes would communicate with each other. If you have inheritance, if you have association, if you have polymorphism, you have to identify graphically before you start the coding part. So UML is the tool that will be used to do this task. UML stands, as we have mentioned, it stands for Unified Modeling Language. So UML provides set of standard diagrams. So basically it is diagrams of classes, relationship, and so on. So it's graphical representation, graphical depicting or graphical representation for object-oriented. So UML used for object-oriented as a graphical representation for the classes and the relationship between these classes. So we can see here an example of class diagram. So this one, we call it class diagram. So at the beginning of your mini project, you have to derive what's your class diagram that will be used to handle your problem. So visually, you have to understand at the beginning, before the coding part, you have to understand how many classes I need if I have some kind of inheritance, some shared information, so that I want to make a superclass in case you have association between these two classes. So all this information must be described using UML as a graphical representation. So basically, You can draw this graph with any editor you wish. Maybe you will be using the Visio or maybe Microsoft Word. Any tool is okay. The most important thing here is to understand what's the meaning. What's the meaning of each field in this diagram? This is the most important thing. To draw it with any tool is okay, no problem. But the most important thing, you have to differentiate what's the appropriate diagram for the inheritance. What's this row means. So all these symbols you must understand carefully, because each symbol will give different meaning. Okay, all right. So now we have the first concept here is the class diagram. The class diagram, basically, it consists of 3 fields, as shown here. So it contains 3 parts. The first one on the top, or the header, it is, we put here the name of the class. So here we put the name of the class. So for instance, if you have a class of car, so this is my class is car. Okay, so here I put the name only. Here in the second part, I have to put the variables, attributes, or we call them member variables. So as a convention used here, we call all these variables as a member variables of this class. So maybe in your car, you have a variable of color. So here, for instance, I have one variable which is string, will be my color. I have integer, cost, and so on. So here you have to put your variables, but in fact we will not make like this. We have a standard for this, but just here for illustration, I just want to show you what you have to put here. So here we put all the variables. The last one, which is here, I have to put the functions, or member functions, I call them. Okay, so I have here to get the color, set color, calculate the cost, whatever, move the car, and so on. So here I have the functions will be in the last part. All right, clear for you? With class diagram, I have 3 parts: the name, variables, functions. Okay, I hope it's clear. So next, we have here an example for this class diagram. So this is UML class diagram here. So this is the name of the class. So this is the class in UML. And this is the code. This is C++ code. So what's the mapping now between UML class diagram? So this is class diagram, and this is the equivalent code. So now here on the top, we have the class name. So this is my class is rectangle. So this is the name comes here. Okay, I'm trying to do mapping. So the second part is here. I have 2 variables, which are the width of rectangle and the length. So here in the code, this is the first part of the coding here. So I define these variables as a private, as we have mentioned previously. By default, if you don't have this, it means private. So the default choice is private. If you put it, is okay. So we have the first variable here is the width. So I have a double with a semicolon. It's simple coding. So here I have the length. So this is my variable length will be double. The last part of the class diagram shown here, I have the derived functions. So I have setWidth. So this is my first function. It will be linked to the prototype here. So this is my first function, setWidth here. It will return a Boolean value and it will take as input double. But you can see here, it's still something is missing. How I know here I have one variable. Maybe I have two. Double, double also. How I know the return variable is Boolean. Why it's not integer? So no information here. You see? So later I will explain what I have to add. It's still not completed. This one is not complete. Just we explain the idea here. So I have set length. So this is set length here. We'll return a Boolean value. So this is my function is here. I have getWidth will be linked to here. But you see, I have an additional type here. Additional value is constant. So later, of course, I will explain what do we mean by constant here. This is the return value for the prototype. No input here, so this is void. And here I have a constant. I make this function as a constant. So I have get length. So this is get length here. It will return double, get length, no input, and this function I make it constant. Okay, so the last one is get area here. So it would be linked here. It will return double. Nothing will be passed to this function, and I make it constant. Okay, all right, this is mapping just straightforward. Of course, some information still are missing here because how I know what's the type of return value, how many parameters this function will take, and so on. All right, clear for you right now? Any question right now? Okay, I will move to the next slide. Okay, so now you see here, there is still information here are not enough. So I'm adding some info in the second slide. I want to compare here. So you can see I have minus, minus, plus, 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 plus. In the previous one, nothing here. I just put the name. So meaning that it's not completed. This UML class diagram here is still not completed. Okay, so now we have another concept in UML. In the class, you have to identify for each one which one is private. Minus means private. So minus sign here means private member. But the plus means public member. Okay, you remember the public and private variables from the previous lecture. So minus used for indication of this variable is private, but in case of plus, meaning that this variable, this function will be public. So you can see all the functions here. I make them, all of them public. So I have a public functions here, but in case of the data, so this is the meaning of data hiding. You are hiding your data here, but your functions will be visible in order to be the interface to access these attributes. So I make them all public. Okay, clear the differences between public and private and what's the appropriate symbol you have to use in UML. This is UML still. We are talking about UML class diagram. Okay. So next, here we have to indicate the data type. Okay, so now we are adding more information. Now I have the name only of the attribute or the variable here, but I don't know which type of this variable. Is it integer or double? So I have to add more information. So I will see here single colon. So I'll make this double. So this variable will be double. Also this one will be double. So I have to add more information to the class diagram as shown here. So this is private. This is the name of the variable, colon, followed by the type. Okay, to indicate the data type member, place a colon. So we have to use the colon. See, this is our colon. Followed by the name of the data type. So after the colon, this is the type. Okay, clear? So we are adding information to the class diagram. The length is private. This is the name of the variable, followed by colon, followed by the type. All right. Well, we move to the second slide here. So we have additional information for the functions. Now for the variables here, we already know it's private. This is the name and this is the type. But now we will move to the functions. I want to know what's the return value here and what's the input to this function. So this is the type of this function is public. This is the name of the function, and between brackets here I have to identify how many variables I have. So I have one variable, so the width, followed by colon, followed by the type. So in case you have two variables here, you have to put colon here. I have the height, for instance, colon here, and it will be double. So I'm adding another variable here. Okay. So now I can understand that this function, based on this information here, I will know this function is public because of plus. This is the name of the function, and it takes one variable of type double, and this is the name of the variable. Okay, clear for you? So to indicate the data type of functions parameters, variable, place a colon followed by the name of the data type after the name of the variable. Okay, it's very similar to the variables in the case of attributes. Okay, so now I think we finish. Okay, we have the return value. Still some information is missing. What's the return value from this function? So I have to put it after. So you see, this is the standard. You have to follow the standard when you design your UML class diagram. You have to follow this design. So now this function is public, the name of the function, the input of this function, colon here, followed by the return value. So in case you return integer, so you have to replace this one with integer. Okay. You have to mention, of course, if missing here, meaning that because in class diagram you have to mention all information. It's different from the programming. In case you don't have mentioned void, it's by default will be void. But in class diagram, you have to mention all these informations. Okay, so any question right now? I hope it's clear for you.
No questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now this is the full information for the class diagram. So I have the rectangle class diagram here. This is the name of the class. I have two attributes, width, which is private, and it's of type double. This is private, this is the name, colon, followed by the type here. These functions all are public. The name of the function, the input type, and the return value. You see all, boolean, boolean, double, double, double. Okay?
Doctor, I have a
Okay.
question.
Yeah.
But it didn't mention that it should be the last three functions are constant.
Yeah. This information in the class diagram, if we return back, in the coding, the constant variable, what's the mean of constant first? I have to explain what do we mean by constant. So constant means because of the main idea of object-oriented that you need to protect your data. This is the whole idea of object-oriented. We have some kind of protection for these data to be hidden from outside. So when I mention here as a constant, because here, this is the function now, what's the idea of this function? Get width. Basically, this function, when you call it, it will return the value of width here, right? It's get the width of this object. So you have to define object, you have to set the width first, then you have to read the width. For instance, I want to calculate the area, so I have to call this one and do the operations. Okay, so now basically this function will return the width. When I put constant here, meaning that don't change the value of the width, make it fixed, because inside here, from here, you can modify directly. If by mistake, if the programmer by mistake, we have some constant value like the by or whatever, I want to keep this information because here in the set, I can modify. You see here, when I set, meaning that I will update the value because I'm receiving a new value. So I will update this one and this one from the setter. So only who is authorized to update this information? Only the set functions. But in the case of the get, what's the problem here? You can update, maybe by mistake, the programmer, before he returned the actual value, if he set the width here inside the code in the implementation, so he, by mistake, make the code width equal 0, then return width. So in order to make sure this value is still fixed, constant, you have to mention in the code. But here, there is no information about this. We only need to know what's the return, the basic information. So this is extra, will not be given in the UML diagram. Okay, clear? Clear the idea of constant? Yeah. Later, of course, now, don't worry about this stuff because next lecture and go on, we will start our implementation. All these ideas will be clear for you. But from now, you have to understand the constant meaning that these attributes will be fixed. There is no change because we are reading here. In the case of the width, if you make this constant, it will be wrong here because you will not be able to update these attributes. Okay, so I return back to my previous slide. Okay, this is the final class diagram after putting all the attributes. So in fact, the first step you have to do in your project, you have to derive the class diagram for all objects. For instance, if you have class of students, class of whatever your project, you have to derive first what's the class diagram for each one. Then you have to find the relation. What's the relation between the class rectangle with other class shape, for instance. So you have to know. Later on, we will talk about the association. We will give the appropriate symbol for each one. So right now, only you have to know the class diagram, the three parts of the class diagram, without any relation with other classes. Okay, so we have another example here. So we have the inventory item. This is the name of the class. In this class, we have 4 attributes. The first one is private. So this is the description. It's of type pointer here. The second one is the cost of type double. The units in type of integer. So here you see I can put here also private functions, not only attributes, but also in case I need to use this function, but it's private, will not be accessible from outside. So it's just function. I move it here in order to keep this for the private section, and this one will be for the public. So all plus I put it here. Also, if you wish, you can make this one belong to here. It's similar, but here we put it in the private section because it's private for the class. Okay, so I have a function here. It's private. So this function will return nothing, and it will receive 2 variables, the size and the value. Okay, this one later we will discuss about this one, which take the same name of the class. You see, we call it the constructor here. 1, 2, 3 is the representation. This function will take the same name of the class, so we call it constructors. Okay, later we will discuss more about constructors and destructors. So this is the constructor. The first one, the first implementation, I have 3 different implementation for this constructor. This will not take any values, so return void. So the second one will take character void. Basically, the constructor will not return anything for you. Constructor, it will be called automatically when you create your object. So the first function that will be called is the constructor. So I have 3 different representation for the same function, the constructor. Okay, in this case, I have 2 variables. I have another function here, which will take the same name of the class. So it's inventory item here, but I have tilde here. So this tilde meaning that this is the destructor. So here I'm using UML again. This is not coding, it's just UML. So this tilde is reserved for the destructor. So the destructor will not take anything. It's very similar to the first constructor. So basically, constructors and destructors used for memory management to allocate object and to destroy the object using the destructor. Okay, I think the rest is okay. It's basic functions that we already explained previously. Any question right now?
No, doctor.
Okay. I think this is the last. Yeah, this is the last for us. It's very short today. We are talking about only the class diagram. More relationship between the classes will be given later. Okay, if no more question, I have to stop here. I will take the attendance and I will say goodbye. Any question?
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
None from me. Thanks, doctor.
Welcome.
You're right there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I will share with you. Just a minute to share the attendance here.
Is there attendance?
Just a minute. Just a minute. I'm sharing here.
Okay.
Okay, you can see now the attendance. You can see.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you
Yes,
very
thanks,
much.
doctor.
See you next time. Assalamu alaikum.
Bye.
See you.
Thank you. Salam.